Hello there, this is Paulette Downey, and I have a word from the Lord. Um, God dropped this message into my lap late evening last night, so He just dropped it into my lap. I was kind of working on another thing to talk about, not today, it wasn't going to be today, but it was something that I was working on, and He dropped this just right in my lap. In the evening. And then when I went to sleep, he gave me a dream that he wanted me to actually send this message out today. So obviously, someone really needs to hear this message. So this message is: do not judge, or you will be judged in the same manner. So basically, don't judge, or you will be judged in the same way. When we talk about judging people, like first of all, I'm not talking about not admonishing toxic behavior or inappropriate behavior or just like bad behavior. I'm not talking about we have to admonish things that are like unbiblical, things that are just wrong, things that are not right. So I'm not talking about not about anything that comes up, that people are doing that are wrong. You have to call people out on things that are being done that are wrong. But what I am talking about is basically making judgments about people, about how they live, about decisions that they make, about things that they do, and then just making judgments like you're the police of judgments, or like you have a right. And so I'm gonna, just go right into this. I do have scripture. I'm gonna start off with scripture. This is from Matthew 7. Matthew 7, and it is 1. So, Matthew 7, 1, judging others. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. So, I'm going to start off here. What I want to talk about, one of the things, is, there are some people. There are some people who I think because they have a they have a PhD in zinc, that they have the authority to talk. The authority, not only the authority and knowledge to talk on everything. Like they just think because they are so highly educated and in a specific area, be it zinc, be it aviation, be whatever, but because the education is so high that they feel that they are just knowledgeable about everything, things that they haven't been exposed to, things that they've been exposed to at a minimal level. They feel that they are the authority on everything. Another group, people who have platforms. People who have large platforms feel because they have a large platform that they just have the right to say whatever they want, even though they don't know what they're talking about, and make assumptions and judge people and belittle people. And so that does not give anyone the right to judge people. It doesn't give anyone the knowledge or whatever background. So we all, like all of us, we have what I like to call tunnel vision. So, we all grew up wherever we grew up in our communities, in our, communities, background, heritage. So we all have tunnel vision of basically the things that the people that we grew up around, our ethnicity, our background, education, and everything. So, but that's limited. And so we are all looking through a tunnel vision, and so there is that tunnel vision. But around the tunnel vision, there is a world out there. So a lot of people think because they are looking at the world through their tunnel vision, that when something happens in someone else's life and it doesn't match with what the experience is and what they've seen and what they've been brought up with, then it must be imaginary, it must be fake, they must be lying, it can't be real because they haven't experienced it. So just because we haven't experienced something, that doesn't mean that it's not true. So just because I haven't experienced driving a ship, that doesn't mean that other people in the world haven't, have or haven't. So I may not know how to drive a ship, but there are people out there who do. I do not know how to fly a plane, but there are other people out there who do. So I cannot make the assumption that because I don't know how to drive a plane, that no one else knows how to drive a plane simply because of my background or my limited education in aviation or my limited education in nautical. I can't make that assumption, but many people do. Many people, they make these types of assumptions and they assume and they think because they haven't gone through it, that no one else can. So when we are looking through the lens of life, we are looking through it from our experiences and what we've been brought up with and what we've been exposed to. And many different people have been exposed to many different things. So be very careful when you are judging other people simply because you have um, a limited mindset or information or knowledge about something. Just because you don't know it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because none of us come into this world knowing everything, and no matter what kind of education we have, that education cannot prepare you to know everything in life. One thing I want to talk about, well, there's a few things that I want to touch on when we're talking about judging people. So one of them is about basically making assumptions about people. I was, this was like probably a couple of months ago, and I was listening to this worship singer. He was being interviewed by somebody, a worship singer who I like. And he was basically talking about how a group of people were criticizing him and saying that he wasn't a Christian because he was dancing to secular music. Now, like this is a religious type thinking. This is not biblical. There is no sin in dancing to secular music. There's nothing wrong in it. It's nothing sinful. It's nothing evil. It's nothing bad. Um, but you have some Christians who look at listening to secular music and dancing as evil, as wrong, as unbiblical or whatever. And so this is a wrong thinking, and this is a religious thinking. And they're making assumptions, and not only were they making assumptions, but they were putting him down. They were saying that he wasn't a Christian. They were just getting in. It was just really ugly. How they were looking at him, and these, and this is wrong. From his part, I felt bad simply because he felt he had to prove himself to these group of people who I guess were his fans. And truly, if you are really rooted in God, if you're really rooted in the relationship that you have with God, you're not going to try and prove your relationship with anyone. Like if you're married to somebody, or if you're friends with someone and someone says, you have a group of people saying, like, oh, she's not really, friends with that person, or she really doesn't love, the husband she's with or whatnot. You're not going to go and try to prove to these people just how much you love your husband, or prove to these people just how good of a friend you are. And so if you are really, in my opinion, if you're really rooted in God, um, things like that should not wave you in your relationship, nor should you let things like that bother you, because people are always going to talk. Jesus was holy. He was God. He was sinless. He brought no harm to the world. He healed so many people. And they called him Satan. They called him Satan. They called him every name in the book. So if they said what they said about Jesus, and if they treated Jesus the way they treated Jesus, ultimately murdering him on the cross, who else are they not going to belittle and criticize? And it is important for us to really, kind of get a mindset. And this is something God has been working with me for years on. And so I'm toughening up. You can't worry about what people think. And if people are, like saying things like, dancing, because you're going to be doing a lot of things, you're always going to rub people the wrong way. Like you're not going to please everyone. You're not going to please everyone. So you might as well just try and please God. Just live to please God. And whoever is for you will be for you, and whoever is against you will be against you. And let me tell you, even if you try to please those people who are against you, they are still going to be against you. So the best thing to do is to basically just live to please God. So that's one assumption. Another assumption, another example I'm going to give here is people who, like I said, they make the assumption that they're just experts in everything. I saw this social media post, it was many years ago, and it was right around the time when I was homeless. And this person posted this on their social media account, that everyone, and now I'm quoting this, or hopefully I'm quoting it, everyone knows that, no, this is how this person said it. I was once, this is now I'm speaking about what the social media account said, and I'm just abbreviating it, but I was once homeless, and everyone knows that the reason why a person is homeless is because they've been overspending. They've spent their money. That is probably the most ignorant comment a person could ever say. As someone who's homeless, and not for that reason, and as the many people who I met who were or are homeless, who I met over the course of 2 years, who were homeless for a myriad of reasons where I couldn't even imagine that someone could be homeless because of that. There were so many different reasons why a person can be homeless. Shopping could be one of them. Like she said, she herself was homeless because of shopping, because this is what she said, everyone knows that it's because you spent too much money, you were shopping. So clearly she was homeless, and that was the reason why she was homeless. But not everyone is in that same situation. So to make a statement like that it's very ignorant and very insensitive. And it tells me that this person comes at life looking at it through a lens, through their lens of what they were brought up on and the experiences that they have. But people who have been homeless have come from many different reasons. Some of them very tragic, some of them very sad, and yes, some were very They could have prevented it. But there were many reasons. And before you go around judging people and making assumptions, maybe, like sometimes it's best to just keep your mouth, like just zip it. Now, I'm not saying like I've made judgments too. I'm a little like for me, because of the experiences that I've had throughout the course of my life, and I like to refrain from judging people. I like to try and get facts. I'm not always good at it. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you may rush to judgment. But when it comes to judging someone else's life and what's going on in it, I like to try and just keep what I have to say about that person's life next to nothing because I don't have the information. And I think we really need to adopt that kind of like a behavior instead of just rushing to judge someone and thinking that we're an expert on everything because we haven't experienced it or we haven't seen it in our lives. So if it hasn't happened in our lives, it's impossible to happen in anyone else's life because that is almost like a superiority complex when you're saying that it hasn't happened to me. I haven't seen it happen to anyone else in my life. So if it hasn't happened to me and I haven't seen it, then it can't happen to anyone. So that's like a superiority complex going on right there. So that right there is alarm for something. So it's very important that we remove ourselves and listen to what other people are saying and try to understand where they're coming from instead of just making assumptions. Now, another reason, and this is why I said, like, a lot of things have happened in my life, so many things, so many bizarre things, so many that has given me the sensitivity to not just rush to judgment. Now, another one, I had a colleague, and I was around 30, so I was very young then, and I can't remember the situation that she was going through at the time. But I remember a group of people who I worked with were talking about her, and they were saying negative things about the situation. I like this person very much. I refrained from saying anything. I listened, but I refrained from saying anything. I didn't know the whole situation, and I just said, like I didn't know. But because what they were saying, I kind of believed it. But like I said, I wouldn't say anything because like I said, I was very sensitive. I was always very sensitive about things going on in other people's lives, like not wanting to judge people and things, even at that age, even in my young age. So she came back to me. I don't know why, and I think because like I said, I liked her and she liked me too. We got along well, and so she said to me, Paulette, and she told me about the situation that she was going through. She didn't know what the other people were saying. She had no clue, but it was just that she felt comfortable with me. And so she said to me, she told me what was going on in her life, and she explained exactly why what was going on. It was completely different from all of those people who were making a wrong assumption about what was going on in her life. These people were talking like they were authority, like they knew what was going on. And what she told me was the complete opposite of why she was going through what she was going through, why she was dealing with what she was dealing with. At 30, that taught me a major lesson. I kept that lesson from what she told me, to never make assumptions based on my limited information or what other people are feeding me, but to question everything. And you know what? It's none of my business that she was going through what she was going through. It's none of my business. I don't really even need to question it. But and it wasn't their business either. And they really shouldn't have been talking about her in the depth and in the way that they were talking about her, because it's none of their business. But people make things that aren't their business. And you're always going to have people like that. Around. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. This is a world, and there are people who simply like to gossip and feel superior in the assumptions that they are making about people. But that taught me a major lesson to always, like, whatever, like, when I hear things about people, to not just jump on the bandwagon and believe it, but to actually question, well, could this have happened, or could this have happened? Um, so that's where we're talking about word assumptions and judgment. Now, the other one is context. And this one is a big one. This one's a big one. So what I'm gonna do with this one is I'm gonna like create like an imaginary story here. Imaginary story of context. Basically taking things out of context or not having the complete context of something. And so, I'm just gonna say this fictionary person is named Carrie, and so this is how I'm gonna say. So, Carrie is talking with her friend about a television show. I don't know, I don't really watch TV, but Carrie's talking about a friend with about a television show. So Carrie says to her friend about the television show, "You know what scene I liked the most is when Sarah said to her boyfriend to make her jealous." To make him jealous. Sarah said to her boyfriend to make him jealous that I skinny dipped in a swimming pool with 100 men. Now, if you have somebody who is devious, who is evil, and who wants to make someone look bad, they will edit that statement to say it's Carrie's voice. And so Carrie said the statement about the scene that she liked the most in the television show that she's watching. But if you have got someone of that kind of mind, they will edit that information to say, like, to make my boyfriend jealous, I skinny dipped in a swimming pool with 100 men. Now, if you take that edited version and you blast it out to everyone, they're going to say, oh my gosh, this woman, she skinny dipped with 100 men to make her boyfriend jealous. That's all they're getting. And this is what people do. It is a sad, sad truth that before people will say, why am I receiving this? How did this conversation start? What is the full context? They will jump on the information that was given to them. They don't think about anything else. They don't question why they're receiving the information. They don't question what was the full context of the conversation. They just jump on the piece of information that was fed to them. And we need to think before we jump and make assumptions and assume things about people. And yeah, it's about people. But a lot of people don't. They just jump on things. Now, another thing I am going to talk about, because this is one that I've experienced personally, and it was real education for me, and I thank God, and I've shared this with him. being homeless has really opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's opened my eyes to a lot of things in law enforcement. When I was in Atlanta, I was exposed to, a lot of people really, like kind of like fighting the authorities. So I mean, like because I was homeless, I'm out there, I'm seeing the whole thing, and so really just kind of when I say fighting, like arguing, like being combative, not doing what law enforcement is asking them to do, not doing what law enforcement is paid to do, and just basically being argumentative, being combative, not leaving property or doing what the law enforcement is asking them to do. And so I'm seeing this play out in its full context. I'm not seeing a video of 5 minutes where, like something bad happens and then it looks like, the cops did something wrong. I'm seeing the whole thing. Like, luckily, like the ones that I saw, the cops were really, the authorities, they were, like they handled it well. And I really just, my hats off to them because they were arguing with these people for a good length of time. And, you know, but and it was also funny when I came to New York and standing in line, I was waiting, like for them to feed us food and everything. Like you can go and you get food. And there was a couple of these gentlemen, and one gentleman was saying, I don't know how, like I was there, I heard the entire I heard the entire conversation going on, but I didn't pay attention to the entire conversation until the one gentleman said, yeah, the cops were there and they telling me to get off and move and da 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 da. And I was telling them like who they think they are. And then the other guy says to him, well, why didn't you just whack him or hit him or something? And then the guy said, yeah, I was going to do that. If the cameras weren't there, yeah, I would have just punched him out. And it's like, God, like what? Like what planet? Like what? Where have you placed me here? Where you allow me to hear this stuff? Where you allow me to hear these conversations? Where you allow me to see this stuff? So you had two gentlemen basically saying that like if the cops were trying to do anything like to kick them off the property or whatnot, and if they were in some kind of environment where there weren't cameras, that they would actually physically attack the police. And I'm like, I don't believe this. Like, I don't believe they're having this conversation in front of me, first of all. And I don't believe that this is how some people think. So I really believe, I'm going to be honest with you, that one thing about me, and because I said, like, why do you, God, you allow me to hear all these things, is that I am, I'm, how can I put it? I'm a very partial person. That is a trait I've noticed in myself since I was very young, like 7, 8. Very partial, and I always like to stand up for people. And so God knew He could trust me with exposing me to these types of environments and allowing me to see situations like that because He knew that I would be honest in how I presented it. And I would say it as is, not to show favor to one group or another group, but to just tell it as it is. And so I know that he trusts me enough to be honest with what I'm seeing. And so He has allowed me to be privy to these types of exposures. So that, I can be honest and present it as is. So, but when you get clips, and like say if something really breaks out and you get like a 5-minute clip of it, and it's a violent clip, and the victim, ends up being hurt, then it looks like the ones who had power, or say the authorities, are the ones who did it violently. Like I'm not saying that all situations are the victim's fault. But I am also saying that all situations aren't the police's fault either. And I feel like the police have really been um, blacklisted in that sense. Because, like people just look at clips and then they just jump on the clips without knowing the full context. And because I've been privy to seeing the full context of things and hearing the full context of things, I know differently. And I know it is so wrong to just base your opinion on a clip or on just a few words without getting the complete context of something. You need to question. You need to think, okay, I got this, but what happened before? And what happened after? Like, what happened? Why did this happen? Why wasn't the tape, why wasn't the tape rolling when it started? Why was just that segment shown? So that's another thing. And that was just another kind of, context. And like I said, this is because I've been exposed to this. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. Like, I don't think anyone wants to be homeless. Um, and but I would not change anything on the course of my life that God has placed me on. I wouldn't change. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't change the course because the knowledge, the life knowledge, the things that I have learned. Just from being homeless, the things that I've been exposed to, the people who have talked to me about their situations, about their experiences, has made me more sensitive to things that take place in the world, things that are happening in the world, and people and situations. So, context is so important. When you are being fed something, question why you are being fed it. Question where it is coming from. Why is this information coming to me? Why am I hearing it? And what is going on in that person's world that is maybe making them respond or making them react in a certain way. So another one is language, and I'm going to bring up language. Yeah, so language, I'm just going to, like some people, and I feel like, and this is from, I'm just like talking as a Christian here. Some people feel that in order to be a Christian, you have to speak Christianese. You can't curse or swear, and I'm not saying you should. We're not supposed to. We're not supposed to be doing a lot of things, but we do, and Christians do too. Christians sin, and there's all different ways in which Christians sin. But putting on an outworldly, just putting on this kind of outwardly representation of godliness, wholeness, talking peace, which we should, but that's not often the case. Maybe some people can do it better than others because we all have our vices. We do. We all have our vices. Some people, even as Christians, they lie a lot. It is a vice of theirs, and some people, they may judge a lot. That is their vice. But that doesn't mean the important thing is when you have God in your life, when you have the Holy Spirit in your life, when there's a renewal of the mind, that you are changing, that you are seeing that where you were 5 years ago, you're not today. And that is probably the most important thing, is that whatever vice you have, is that when you look back, you see that, okay, I've improved, I've gotten better, I'm better than I was 5 years ago, I'm better than I was 10 years ago. Are we going to be perfect before we die? No. Perfection will come after death. But as long as we are growing, as long as we are getting better along the way, because of the perfecting that the Holy Spirit is doing in us, the healing, the renewing of the mind from reading the Bible on a daily basis, and it's speaking to us, the praying, the communication, the relationship with God, and then so many other things like going to church, like just so many other things, maybe listening to sermons or whatnot on YouTube, listening to worship music. So there's the continuation of the renewal of the mind, but the Bible is probably most important in that one, and praying. So just the whole renewal, but none of us, like I'm going to be on, like, you know what, I prior to, like, I accepted Jesus Christ into my life when I was 17 years old. I was one of those strict Christians, okay? Like, I was rigid, like, rigid. Um, when I backslid, I backslid probably, yeah, in my mid 20s. And, but I never said a curse word. I never said like a curse word did not come out of my mouth. So I backslid, got a job as a waitress, as a server. And I don't know, for those who have never served in their life, waited tables, you don't know that serving is a very stressful job. It's probably one of the most stressful jobs. They say right up there with working on Wall Street. So it is a stressful job. And, a stressful job, and you're working amongst a lot of people who swear. So I never uttered a word. And so a good friend of mine, who, he worked at the restaurant as well. I think it was like 3 years in the course, and he pissed me off, and I cursed at him. He turned back to me and he said, Paulette, he said, when you first started here, you were like an angel. He said, I didn't even think you knew what a curse word was. He goes, look at you. Look at you. I cannot believe you. And I cracked up. We cracked up because it was so true. It was so true. I never used a curse word. Well, let's just say between the stress of working as a server, being around those people, at times I can be a trucker. I can have a trucker's mouth. Now, I don't have a trucker's mouth when I'm in conversation with people. Like, if I have conversations with people, even if I get mad, like even if there is a point of heightened anger, I don't curse. Like, this, it's just not who I am. It's just, like, I don't have conversations with people and curse and, like I don't do that. Like, it's not me. And like I said, even in anger, that, like, that's not going to just fly. It won't fly out of my mouth. Like, cursing will not fly out of my mouth. But if I'm in the privacy of my own space and I stub my toe, or if I'm provoked in certain ways, but in my own space, or if I'm upset and I'm hurting in my own space, some not pleasant words will fly out. And in my favorite place, like my second place from home, which I don't have right now, my car, that's when I really realize my humanity. That's when I really realize that God, I'm not as holy as I think. The car always will humble me and allow me to see that, you know what, I'm not as humble as I think. Because being in the car and driving on the road and the many things that come at you, a few words will fly out of my mouth. Have I gotten better? I've gotten better. But a few words will fly out of my mouth. And it's just what it is. Like, I'm not a road rage kind of, driver. But I'm like, I can't believe it. That's who I am. Well, it's not who I am, but I mean, this is a vice of mine. And I realized, and I was like, God, I feel so bad, like this, but this is, and I've gotten better, but it is a vice, and I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't exist. Well, the church that I attended, very much of the Holy Spirit, very, very at spiritual level, and the speakers that we would have come in, very, very prophetic, very spiritual, very much at that level. A very close relationship with God, very, very in tune. Many of them had talked about them being like me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. And, you know, and there are Christians who do, who say foul things. I mean, we're not supposed to. But then there are a lot of things we're not supposed to do. And I would like, again, the first Christian who has not sinned in any way to cast the first stone. We all have our vices. But to assume, to judge someone because they do something that you don't do, and to say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Well, yeah, you don't do that, but I'm sure you're doing something that I don't do. And these people who were saying it, these people were spiritually too. Like these people, you could feel like they had beautiful hearts, and the sacrifices they made for God and the things that they did for God, and just their ministries were on fire. And they were honest, and it was just so funny that they had that they were that human to admit that, yeah, this is a vice of mine. And many of them said the same thing when they get in the car. When they get in the car is I feel like the car is like the perfect place to just kind of bring out your real you. And so, yeah, to bring out who you are. I look at the end of the day. At the end of the day, God looks at the heart. He doesn't look at people presenting themselves as perfect. He looks at your heart. And what kind of person are you in your heart? There are people who may show their flaws, but their heart is so beautiful. They have such a beautiful, gorgeous heart. And then there are some people who have this outworldly appearance of holiness, but their heart is so deceitful. God looks at the heart. People like King David, people like Moses, people like the Apostle Paul. And I will say, I'm going to mention this person. One of my favorite characters in the Bible, King Solomon. People with beautiful hearts. King Solomon had a beautiful heart. In fact, I'm really surprised. I know that there's not a lot written. I'm digressing here just for a second, but I'm looking at the time. But I'm surprised that people haven't, really focused on King Solomon. There's not as much written on him as there are on the three former men that I mentioned. But God had a special love for King Solomon. And the only other person that I can think of where he had a special love for was Jacob. So he had a special love for him. And, I hear, some people say, well, he went to hell. No, God wasn't going to let him go to hell. Not with the kind of love he had for him. And God made it very plain to King David when he was talking about King Solomon, that, he talked about how much he loved him and everything. And, even when he was born, when King Solomon was born, God talked about, how much he loved that kid, that baby. The love, you could just feel it. And when he was telling King David about King Solomon, and when he disobeys me, I will chastise him. God chastises those he loves. And King Solomon, with all his wisdom, God gave him that wisdom for a reason. God did not give him that wisdom for him to sit on it. God gave him that wisdom to do what he did. so that he could write Proverbs, and that he could write Ecclesiastics, and that he could write the Song of Songs. And he couldn't have went to hell because those three books were all written in his senior years, where he had time to reflect on his life and his choices. And he had the wisdom to be able to go back and pray to God the way he needed to pray to God to get himself in alignment with God again. So I don't believe he went to hell. I don't believe God would allow him to go to hell. The love was just simply too great. And the fact that God said, when he steps out of line, I will chastise him. But he was given enough time. And he, at the end of the day, he said, God is all. God is everything. And this is the senior King Solomon. And so I'm just curious as to why people don't really talk about that, because like the love that God had for the only other person, like I said, was Jacob, where he had that kind of special love for him. So anyway, I digress. I talk about hearts, but God focuses on the heart. He focuses on the heart. Like he doesn't focus on all these external things. There are things, of course, we should not be doing. There are things that definitely we should not be doing and will definitely send us to hell. But we are sinning every day. We're only human and we are sinning every day. But the important thing is that we are getting better, that we are not doing as much today as we were doing yesterday. And to be judging people and making assumptions and, like all this kind of stuff about other people leads me to the fourth one, projection. You have this one I find fascinating, because you have people who just gossip. They love to gossip. They love to talk about people. They think that they are the experts, and they talk about people doing this wrong and doing that wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing that. You shouldn't be saying this. You should be doing that. Meanwhile, and actually I should go into scripture with that one before I actually, continue with the projection. So this is in Matthew, and it's 7:3-5. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And unfortunately, you have a lot of people who are trying to take specks out of people's eyes when they've got this big plank in their own eye. And I don't know if God has just allowed them, he has just let them go into, their sinful nature, and just, because they're, it's what they want. And they sit there, and all they do is they find fault in this person, and they find fault in that person, and they find fault. And meanwhile, that person isn't nearly the devil that they are. And that is to project, to take away, so that you won't notice what is going on in their world. They're hoping that by putting everything on someone else, by talking about somebody else, by saying this person is this, that, and the other, that you will not notice the plank that is in their eye. So they're noticing the speck in someone else's eye, and they're making sure that the entire world knows about the speck that is in somebody else's eye. Meanwhile, they have that plank in their own eye, and they refuse to do anything about that plank. And they have no intentions of changing. They are worse off now than they were 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, they were gossiping and talking about people and finding flaws in people, not working on their own lives at all, not working to improve on their own lives. They're hypocrites. All they do is see faults in other people. And so the flaws that they're seeing in other people, the other person makes them look like they make the other person look like an angel. They're the devils. wearing the sheep clothing. So they're wearing these sheep clothing, devils, and meanwhile the other person is just being who they are. And then, they take off the sheep clothing, you see that they are a wolf in sheep clothing or a devil or whatever. But they're so quick to, but this is to take it all, to remove any kind of, they want to come across that they're in sheep clothing. They want to look like they're holy. They want to look like they're sweet and nice and wonderful and beautiful. But in reality, they're not. And you have to question. When you see someone criticizing someone, when you see people constantly finding fault in other people, I don't know. I don't know if when people encounter these people, do they enjoy what they're hearing? And I think many people do. But if you are truly living for God, you should be questioning, why is this person talking about all these people? Saying negative things about this person and that person. What kind of person is this person? If all they do is slander and talk about and belittle everyone else, what kind of person is that person? And wouldn't you question that? Shouldn't you? Of course you should. But many people don't, because I do believe that many people like to hear negative things about people. I'm not saying that all people like to hear negative things about people. I'm not saying that. But there are some, and they believe it. They believe what they're hearing. So it's almost like they like what they're hearing. And as a Christian, you shouldn't be listening to gossip. We all have flaws. We all have to work on things. But like I said, some of these people, they are in even a worse state, today than they were 10 years ago. They were talking about people back then. They were slandering people back then. They were lying on people back then. They were saying the worst things about people 10 years ago, and they've only gotten worse. No improvements made on their life. But they're talking about, oh, she shouldn't be doing this. And oh, look at her, she's doing that. Oh, look at him, he does this. Oh, look at him, he does that. Oh, look at him, he says this. Oh, look at him, he says that. Meanwhile, the things that they are doing makes that person look like an angel. We need to question people in our minds when we see people come at us like this. This is not a spirit of God. This is a Jezebel spirit. And so, like I said, this message clearly for someone. If God, like I said, dumped it in my lap, and then I go to sleep, and then in my sleep he tells me he wants me to talk on this today. Clearly this is a message for someone. So that's basically it, what I have to say on this topic of, do not judge, or you too will be judged. I hope that this finds you well. And, I hope it finds you well, and that it helps you. Now, if you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, I would suggest that you give your life to him, and allow him, just give your life over to him. Surrender. Rid yourself of yourself. Whatever you're going through, come as you are. Doesn't matter where you're at, if you're an alcoholic, if you're a drug addict, what kind of lifestyle that you're caught up in. surrender yourself as you are. God is a God of cleanup. He loves cleaning up. He loves doing that. So you don't have to worry about trying to clean yourself up. God will do that for you. Of course, there are things that you have to do on your part, but the important thing is that you surrender your life to Him. You give your life over to Him. Give Him a year. See what He's going to do. Give Him a commitment, a year, like a commitment to see what happens in your life in a year, and then you can measure it from that year. And I'm sure after a year, if you fully commit to God, that you will not want to go back to your old way of living. And so this is all I have to say. And until the next time, have yourself a wonderful day and take care. God bless.